Welcome back to the Prevetted Podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today we're joined by Makoto Kern. He's a founder and product strategy and UX design leader at IIIMPACT, a company that has transformed high-stake enterprise software projects from risky bets into predictable strategic wins. With over 21 years of experience spanning cybersecurity, energy, healthcare, and enterprise SaaS, Makoto has helped Fortune 500 executives and high growth startups alike launch products that not only succeed in the market but also strengthen internal development capabilities. Through Impact's strategic immersion methodology, Makoto bridges the gap between boardroom vision and market ready software, turning chaotic ad hoc development into a disciplined, outcome driven process. Makoto, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. You sure you got the right person? Sounds like that person's done quite a bit. No, I appreciate you having me on the show. I'm excited to hear our conversation.
It's I don't know if it happens to you, but every time I somebody introduce me and all the things I've done, I'm thinking, that doesn't sound like me, right? Because you kind of forget everything you've done, right?
Oh yeah, I know. Just trying to write and remember it, you feel like, oh wow, I guess I've done a few things.
Yeah. I try to summarize it so I can do it in one breath, but sometimes,
I
it's
guess
too
that's
much.
good that
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah. And then eventually you kind of have to pick and choose the
Mhm.
experience depending on the context. So
Exactly.
anyway. Yeah. So a lot of years of experience, a lot of experience with product strategy and
Mhm.
development. So I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation.
For sure.
So tell us a little bit about what was your eureka moment that led you to start Impact.
Yeah, so I mean, I started I did not start as a UX designer. I started as a robotics and kind of manufacturing automation engineer. That's what I trained it for in university, and I did that for about a decade. And I was basically towards the end of my career, I was doing a lot of kind of software modification for manufacturing floors. They were generally, software engineering products or things that are made by engineers for engineers, but people on the manufacturing floor are generally less technical. So, they're assembling a widget, they're doing it 1,000 times. And if they get it wrong, then that's going to cost the company money. So creating a software that they can easily see, hey, there's something happening or whatever, and be efficient. That was something that I think naturally progressed me to get into more of the UX side of things. And, I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. Always read all the magazines and books and everything about just starting your own business. And I guess I'm a bit of I hate the political games and I hate kind of being told what to do. So I always wanted to find, my own thing to start. And, yeah, that's when the .com boom was happening, was when I kicked off Impact. And I was doing a lot of websites, getting into that, creating it for friends, families. And yeah, I was on Craigslist even finding work on Craigslist and projects. And it's funny too, some big company called Turtle Wax. They're pretty big in the United States. They actually had this like sister division that they wanted to create this kind of virtual garage to sell their products. So we made this interactive garage in Flash, and I mean it was like a $25,000 project. I was like, holy cow, this is amazing! My first big gig, and I got to a point where I was just consulting and had a lot of projects. So I just decided to say, hey, I can quit my engineering job. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was nuts. I was driving back and forth. I was making phone calls, in the middle of traffic, during lunch, after work, and visiting clients. And I'm like, okay, I'm done with doing both. I just want to do UX, and yeah, just started getting into that, and started growing my company. And that was out of Chicago, and you know, I I was there probably for about, I born and raised in Chicago, but we ended up moving to Austin, Texas about, I'd say about 11 years ago. And yeah, that's kind of where my team and my company grew pretty big. And that's kind of where we got into more of what we're doing now, which is we not just UX design and not just focused on, conversion of websites or things like that, but we actually got into more of enterprise software, mobile applications, but actually got into the project strategy piece. And that's kind of where we've evolved our organization into just knowing that just having the UX design is just one piece of the puzzle, but having the ear and being at the seat at the table when you're doing product strategy is so important. So we've created this like strategic immersion process where we try to understand what the uh, the leadership thinks and what their business goals are, and kind of create that empathetic understanding of being more user centric versus feature centric. So, like, what are your users' pain points? What are they trying to do? Their journey, and then tie that into your business goals, and then creating like a feature roadmap of what are the next 12 months look like. What are risky features? What are features we know we can start building? And then that kind of creates this holistic approach to actually launching products faster. So that's kind of how it all came about.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
So it, it was quite a journey from robotics to product development.
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, it's been really interesting too, because there's some serendipity there, because one of our clients that I met in Austin, they turned out to be one of the top robotics companies in the world. And when they brought us in, they were already at a point where they tried another UX firm, couldn't do it. And when I told them, I'm like, hey, this is what I studied in school. This is amazing opportunity. And so they were trying to redesign this, what I call like a BlackBerry of controllers, where it had all these hardware buttons, and they they were trying to change it so it was all touchscreen, much more user friendly, looked more modern than what it did before. And so, yeah, we got to working with them, was able to launch this new controller for their robots. They actually showcased this at South by Southwest, and yeah, they're still using it to this day. So it's been really cool to kind of be able to work in the robotics industry again. So
Right, right. Something similar happened to me when
uh,
because I studied software industrial engineering, right?
yeah.
So manufacturing processes and all that. I didn't graduate it because I was pulled into work, right? And but but then I did my career as a software engineer. So
Mm,
um, so I had the opportunity to work on some physical storage, physical um, objects, right? So
mhm.
we were working with shoes and dresses, and you have multiple dimensions on these products, right? So building this, the planning of the warehouses, right?
Oh, okay.
And how the physical location of the
Yep.
product, right? So it was very interesting to work on that, yeah. And it came back to me as well. I studied industrial engineering, so
Yeah.
it was
I
very interesting. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, yeah, I remember yeah, that kind of the setup within warehouses. I mean, that was such an interesting thing, because when I was in manufacturing, I got into it. Uh, I didn't start off with like lean manufacturing and creating Kanban systems and 5S. And when I got into that towards the end of my career, where this one company called Danaher Corporation, really big and pushed that type of lean manufacturing processes. And so we had to rearrange the entire manufacturing floor, where things are set up, optimize things. I mean, just that alone was very interesting, and working with different industrial engineers on how to optimize just for movement, everyday movement, and making it more efficient. And I can only imagine now, when you have these, robotics that just kind of go off and do their own thing. I mean, that's got to be really cool to set up as well.
Yeah, and see it in person, like everything moving. Oh, it's
Hmm.
so fascinating. Yeah, I I built the software and the organization, but
Hmm.
I wasn't able to see the robots working, which
Oh,
I was like, oh, I wanted to see that.
yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. um, so for those that are unfamiliar, can you walk us through what the strategic immersion process looked like from start to finish?
Sure. So basically, when you start off any software project, and you're going to see it now, especially with AI. everybody wants to just jump right into code, just jump into wireframes. If you've not been part of a good process, it's almost like saying, hey, let's build a house first, then let's have the people move in, and then tell me what you really want. And I always try to tell like the people who've not been through good design and good strategy, it's like when you do that, you could already imagine like somebody moving in and saying, hey, I don't want 3 bedrooms, I want 4 bedrooms, I don't want 2 floors, I want a single floor. There's all these changes that they want to make in order to make it work for them. And that becomes expensive when you launch. Thinking you're just going to get these wireframes or jumping right into development actually causes more problems, because in the end, you don't know if the user really is going to use your feature. I've been involved in many companies where many of our clients, we get in there and we see, oh, they just launched a new feature. None of the users are using it. And so they've just spent a ton of money and a ton of resources just to launch something that doesn't really, the users don't really care about. And so, there's a big difference, especially with like enterprise software versus B2C. When you're talking like SaaS or any type of e-commerce, the psychology of making people click and making it easy for users, that's so important. And that's a whole nother way of approaching it. But with enterprise software, the users are generally forced to use it because somebody at the top says, hey, we're using the software, or our internal teams developed the software, you have to use it. And so when you do that, the product strategy is so important, because it really sets apart where most companies, maybe Amazon and Google do this well, but generally most companies, they have poor communication. They make so many assumptions. And when you get in a room, they say, hey, what's important for us? Everybody's going to have a different story. So guess what? When I go into a company and I'm the designer and I'm like, hey, what's important for you? What's the requirements? One person says one thing, another person says another. And then once you figure that out, you move it up the chain of command. And then the leadership says, no, I want something different. And so that becomes a problematic scope creep. You're causing more churn in the end, and actually takes longer to build. So, our process is really trying to get everybody in a room, get the leaders in the room and say, hey, let's make a decision on what really are our business goals. Because at the very end, it's like, are we trying to drive revenue? Are we trying to increase our brand awareness? Are we trying to sell more widgets, this way, or whatever the case is? But that's going to help me as a designer then ask the right questions, saying, okay, you want to place an ad in the middle of the application that pops up every so often. Okay, well, why do you want that? Okay, because it's going to potentially raise our revenue. Okay, well, let's figure out how to do that, and let's do that in a scalable way that we don't have to change every 2 or 3 sprints. And so, this is something where, we get the leaders to make a decision, make a group consensus of like, hey, this is our business goals. And again, like, once you figure that out, then the most important thing is creating a user-centered process. And, Apple made this really valuable during the dot-com boom. They really showed like, hey, you have to have the user as a centered of the whole idea. Like, if you're not solving their pain point, no one really cares. You can't just think we'll just build it and then users will come and buy it. And that's kind of what's happening, I think, a little bit with AI. And we could get into that later, but just because you throw AI in there, do your users really want to use it in that way? Do they want another chatbot or a Clippy? Maybe not. We don't know. But if you don't do the right upfront kind of, hey, this is the pain point, this is their journey, does it really help them? Then it may just not even be used. Especially with enterprise, users are going to go right to their own workflows that they're comfortable with. Whether or not it's most efficient, it's efficient for them. So when you disrupt that, they're not going to like it. So you got to be really careful on how you approach enterprise software, because most likely the initial reaction is going to be negative. And then when it comes to, when you're creating that next 6 to 12 month roadmap, your development team has to know like, hey, what can we fill our backlog with? What can we start like making? So that's where you figure out like, hey, these are things, it's a form or it's a login page. That's easy. We know how to build that. But this is like an entirely new workflow we don't want to just start building it because that's going to be very expensive if we're not sure. So that's where you leverage the UX research and like create prototypes, get people's feedback, and then you iterate to make sure like, hey, okay, we get it now. This is what we're going to build. Then let's launch. And then that's where we create like metrics and making sure we consistently improve. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell and how we came up with that immersion process.
Interesting, very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, one of the things that I'm trying to follow is the lean startup methodology
Yep.
that basically allows you to validate your assumptions
It's
on
like a lean canvas.
what to
It's a
build.
similar.
Yes, yes. And I think that that's geared towards startups, where they're still trying to figure out product market fit. But when they go to enterprise software, enterprise companies, they kind of forget to follow that same
Yeah.
ethos, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it's when it comes to enterprise, they've been so buried where they've had this one product or whatever, how many products for years. So you've got this like environment of like, hey, this has been making us money, so if we want to change it, let's just make it look better, and then that's all we need to do. They don't change any of their processes. They just keep the same way because that's what's been paying the bills. And so changing those bad kind of habits and getting them to understand like there's far more efficient ways in doing things since when you first built your enterprise software and trying to change that throughout the organization. That's like the hard part. For us, it's almost like therapy when we talk to people where it's like, hey, the design part is actually easy, but getting through people's egos, making them change the way they normally do things because it's comfortable for them, that's the hard part. And so that's kind of where I think we get paid as a consulting company. That's what, if we're able to do that, then our job is pretty much done, is because it's changing the mindset of people within their organizations. And it's really hard to do that from the bottom up. You have to do that from the top down. So sometimes some of the clients have to get burnt first to know like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done it that way. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Right, right. My maturity as software engineer started off, I take whatever the product owner gives me as a software engineer, literally, right? I started by not caring about the rest, right?
Yeah.
And or not caring I wasn't aware, right? And then eventually evolved to, well, what we're building, what we're getting from the product owner is what the product owner understands from the users.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, we need to ask as a software engineer is what's in it for the user? What's the value for the user? Right? And then the product owner is the representative of the user, but it's not necessarily saying exactly what the user needs, because there could be these assumptions, right? Or issues in that process, right? But as you said, it's hard from the bottom up to change that. I tried multiple times to help on that process, but it's hard on my side, right?
Oh yeah.
On the software engineering side, yeah.
Yeah. It's when you're trying to make change, especially like I know on a, just like what you're saying is where when you start to have overlap with people's skill set, when I have great developers or great product owners who are used to like having a different eye on things, yeah, when they're not just hyper focused on a small part of it, when somebody's like more knowledgeable about the holistic approach, those teams run so much smoother. And you can tell the experience in that where, yeah, my front end or back end developers are like, hey, what about this, Makoto, from from a UX perspective? And I'll say something about, oh, how about this, using this code or tech base, or can you do it this way to not affect performance or whatever the case is. And when we're able to do that, it just runs so much smoother. But getting those people into a team, I mean, you can have such a much better output, much better quality when they're able to work in conjunction like that. It's not going to come cheap, but so is bad code and bad teams. That doesn't come cheap either. So it's
right.
yeah, it's Yeah, the more I do this and the more you see, like, I mean, it's funny for me as a UX designer, uh, I have to be very empathetic and understanding of people, like be able to read people pretty quickly because they're going to have biases and things like that. And so when I go into a consulting situation, I've got everybody in a room and you start using these workshops, you can quickly see the people who are like struggling, the people who are like really, hungry to learn, and people who are very defensive, and so the you can almost put them in their own personas of like, okay, this person's going to cause trouble, this person's going to be awesome, this person's going to be, they're not going to pay attention.
Right, right. Yeah. I've seen I've seen a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
What the improvements that I was able to make in that process was to get agreements with the product owners to provide more clear requirements
Mm-hmm.
for the software engineerings, right? And articulate better what's in it for the user, right? Because they know it and they have a lot of context, but we as software engineers we don't. So um, we got better requirements, and that way it allow us as on the dev team to work with less interruptions,
Yeah.
with less having to stop and ask questions, right? Because we have all the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So we did it was kind of meeting on both sides, right? We did an extra effort to understand the full workflow and the whys, and then the product owners did their part to they did their part to provide us more clear requirements. There was a lot of resistance at first because it's like, well, start building instead of asking me questions, right?
Yeah.
So until we were able to get through that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once we had all the information um, and understanding what was the value for the user, then we were able to um, build automated tests based on the value for the user, right? If you go to an ATM,
Yeah.
you want to, cash out, right? That's the most, critical thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same, if you're whatever workflow, right? If I'm purchasing something, I want to complete the purchase process, right? So,
Yeah.
whatever it is, understanding that. So we focus the automated test for that, right? And
Yeah.
then from there, we were able to provide more reliable estimations for when it was going to be done,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that it was actually done, right? But we at one point we had to set a boundary on the dev team that is, as dev teams, it's not our job to understand what the user needs. It's to understand what are the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we go over that area, we're doing product, and then we are overstepping our role, right? On a big team, right?
Yeah.
And then we start having a lot of friction with the product team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So um, we did get involved on caring about the user, understanding what are their needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Asking many questions to make sure that we have that right. But we eventually realized it's not our job to go and ask the user what they need, right?
Yeah.
That's product, right? So anyway, that's what I've been doing, for the
Okay.
last 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you been involved in any organization or any situation where you're doing the designing and there really isn't a designer, so you're coding and designing at the same time?
Yes. In big teams, and
Mhm.
particularly in startups, in the big teams, I mean, big corporations, what we did is eventually we got to the agreement with the product owners of giving them a list of components
Mhm.
that were connected directly to React components, right?
Yep.
They didn't necessarily know that they were React components, but we basically told them, this is a toolkit. If you need a component that is not here, we can build it, but it has an additional effort, right?
Yep.
So if we can use this one, then great. If we
Yep.
need one, then we can do that. But because what happened is that when we had 10 product owners, each of them would ask a very specific component that was a little bit different than the other ones.
Mhm.
And then eventually we realized we had like, 10 components that were the same
Yep.
with minor differences. So we went back to the product, and we show them that, and we said, if we can work with these components, if we agree to use them, we're providing a restriction to them, but then you can pick and choose the components, understanding the behaviors. We can do that. We can test that very thoroughly, and then you can have the confidence that you will be able to use it. Plus, we were working towards normalizing the interfaces. So, there was an underlying, effort for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such an important point that a lot of companies, I think, that are not as mature, that don't understand. It's like when you have multiple teams, multiple developers, multiple product owners, and you're all working in creating different parts of the app, you're creating more tech debt by having those 10, 20 different variations. Somebody has to say, hey, how's this different than the other thing? And then when it gets to the user, they're like, well, on this page, the dropdown worked like this, but then on this page, I can actually search within the dropdown and it works this way. And it's like the cognitive load starts to increase. The amount of effort for the dev team starts to increase. And then the amount of effort for the UX person who's trying to put it together is like, wait, am I using this or this dropdown or this or that? So we always go in and saying, okay, let's use the same kind of framework, React or Angular, whatever you're using. Let's use that material framework so it looks all the same and there's less thinking. And then that way we could streamline into solving the problem versus, coming up with just random things that we put together that we think we're using as far as components. And having all that is just wasted inefficiencies. But so many companies are still working in that way where they don't have a design system where there's a single source of truth. They're all working in different silos. I mean, even these big Fortune 500 companies, the amount of silos that are going on where they're not even talking to each other. And I'm not just talking like an energy company, which I've seen they don't even talk. Even their teams within teams don't talk, which is just scary. But then even consulting companies that I've seen, the big ones, not going to name any names, but even them, the processes can vary so drastically between somebody, a team in Chicago versus a team in Miami or whatever. I mean, some of them work flawlessly with great processes. Other ones, they're still using PowerPoint and having, the product person present the designs versus the actual UX designer that created it. So they don't know how to answer the right questions. So it's interesting to see still that vast spectrum of maturity that's out there.
Yes. Yeah. So on our project, we even have issues with each button has different color codes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the other part we push back a lot was, and we still try to, but is accessibility, right?
Yep.
So contrast, buttons locations, accessibility, being compliant on accessibility. That was a big push that we did on our side.
Yeah.
But there was no. I mean, it was a process, right? But at the beginning, there was no. Product owners didn't see that as something important, so we have to educate them. And still, it was basically they would say, "Well, we want to build this feature because we want to, and we have the need for the user, right?" And then we say, well, but if we change just tiny bit of the color code, then we can be, we can have contrast compliance.
Yep.
Can we do that? And, it took us, 10 attempts until they said yes, right? Until eventually, the next feature was a little bit better and a little bit better, right? And that was kind of why we came up with the components. And the intention was to go towards a design system. We didn't get to that level, but we were gearing towards that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the accessibility people understand is that it actually helps with usability as well. There's different levels of accessibility, and it is important. And I think if you're dealing with, especially with consumers, you could get sued if you don't make it accessible. You get in trouble,
Right.
especially in the United States. So it's so important to have that, especially if you're dealing with consumers. Enterprise, I feel like they don't have to do it as much, but the amount of people that are colorblind and how many apps I've seen where they just said, oh, let's just make that button red. And that'll show that it's, it's important or it's a warning. But I said, you know how many people are colorblind that don't see that as red? if you don't have an icon plus the word or something that shows not just a single thing like color, they're going to miss it, especially if you're looking at a table and they have to disseminate between something that's a warning, whatever, or this or that. And, that becomes problematic. And then you see again, like 50 different icons. It's like, oh my God, they got to memorize what this little tiny icon looks, means. I mean, these are like common mistakes I see all the time in enterprise software.
Right. Yeah, we try to work on that before, showing that, you have to build a feature and then change it for accessibility, change it for usability. Then, we were building the feature 3 times. So if we can do it once and do it right, it will save us time, right? Plus React, React is very challenging to implement accessibility because it looks like a select or a drop down or whatever, but it's a JavaScript component. So it's not compliant on anything. You actually have to build all of that from the ground up, right? So it took us a while to do that. When I start my own project from start, and with that experience, I start using semantic HTML as much as possible, because they it's like this little workhorse, right? It works. It's accessible. It's compliant. It's everything. It doesn't look as pretty as other interfaces, but hey, it works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so much work on cross-browser compatibility, mobile. So yeah, it took us a while to do that. Yeah. So you also talk about stakeholder alignment, right? And that's one of the critical first steps before any design or development begins, right? Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so all the leaders, again, like I said, they all make assumptions, and most of them are poor communicators throughout an organization. They don't sit in a room, they don't write down things, they just kind of assume that everybody knows, like, hey, this is important or this is important. Every time we've gotten into a room and we have all the leaders, all the stakeholders kind of like basically map out, here are all your features. Now let's pick and choose which ones are the most important. They're all over the place. Some of them may cluster to, like, you have these sticky notes and you have these features and they may cluster in one area or another. Sure. But I think some of that is because they see their boss putting this sticky over here, like, oh, I better say that's important. But no, I think having that alignment is just so key, especially, maybe between, the CEO to maybe his next reports or some of the VPs, but there might be some alignment. But when you start jumping from sales to marketing to customer support to product to development, then it starts to become more sporadic. And what they think is important may not think of somebody else is important. But this is where, having people make decisions in the room, it puts pressure on them, but it cuts down so much back and forth conversation. I mean, we literally do these workshops within like 2 days, 3 days tops. And we are able to get to such clarity that when I hear, like, oh, we have a roadmap, okay, let's see it. And they kind of disseminate that amongst certain people. I'm like, why doesn't everybody know this? This should be front and center to show, like, hey, when I'm a designer, you tell me to do something, I'm going to say, well, does this tie? This is why I designed it this way, because it ties up to this, because everybody in the room is going to have a opinion on design, because it's very subjective in certain things. And, when it gets to development too, you could say, like, hey, this component is going to take me 10 hours to create versus what you design may take me 100 hours. Can we meet in the middle? Or I'm just going to go and do the 10-hour thing, but not realizing it's a big detriment to user experience. But your job is to finish that backlog. That's your incentive. And so it's like, that's why when I hear teams that, oh, our dev team is designing as where the product designers, they're proud of it, I'm like, that's a conflict of interest, because their job isn't to to put the user first. It's the feature. Let's get these features out. And you, of course, like a designer, you want to showcase how good your design is. As a developer, you want to showcase how much you put so much effort into that component. Or components. So you try to show everything on that interface. And so again, that's when you tie it back up to the leadership and that alignment. Like, what are we trying to do here in this? And it could be in context of the user. Like, is the user coming in and their job is to do X? Let's get them to do X at that moment in time. And that's hard sometimes for a lot of people to understand. It's like, okay, here's a dashboard. Let's show them a bunch of pretty like graphs and charts and everything. It's like, is that what they need? Or do they just want to know, give me a big red, X that says this is broken, go fix it. And then that's it. My job's done. That's all you want to do. So I mean, that alignment is such a key thing. And again, this is where the therapy comes in, and you see how misaligned leaders are. And this is just at the top level. When you go from the top then to the middle management, there's gaps there too that you have to really communicate and say, hey, this is what everything's looking like. And so you see the maturity of an organization and how well communication flows through and decision-making flows through just through doing this type of workshop.
Amazing. Yeah. I've seen stakeholder misalignment, and yeah,
it's 99% guaranteed in most companies, unless you're like maybe Tesla, I don't know, or even Google, I'm sure has that issue.
Yeah, I mean, on bigger organizations, you most likely are going to have that issue, and I think it's this concept of unstable stability.
Mm-hmm.
If you grab something below the center of gravity, it's going to be unstable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but with electronics, you can keep it stable, right?
Yeah.
So, you have fighters doing that. That's how they fly. They're unstable by nature, and they have a lot of electronics to keep it stable.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel that in any organization, the tendency is towards misalignment, towards chaos, right? So there has to be always an effort towards, clarity, clarity and alignment,
Mm-hmm.
a continuous, active effort, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I've seen that happen many times. Yeah. Where I had the biggest challenge was working with startups,
Mm-hmm.
where the CEO is a product.
Yep.
The product leader, because they have there are multiple issues. One is that they are running multiple roles, so everything happens in their head, and by the time they give you the feature, it's like, I don't have time, just build it, right?
Yeah.
I don't have time to explain you everything, right? So we as software engineers will lose a lot of context,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes because they're there's a new company, new organization, they have this expectation where the software engineer should do software design, QA, test, deploy, everything, right? Part of it is because they're a small organization, but still, that means that the software engineer has to excel on everything, right?
Yeah.
And,
you have to have unicorns on your team. If you don't, then
right.
And they're not willing to pay for those unicorns, not knowing like, hey, isn't the stat 9 out of 10 startups fail? And then 9 out of 10 of those fail within the first 5 years. So there's probably, similar reasons as to why. And most hires, and they don't realize like, yeah, if you're competing and you're trying to move fast and create something that there might be other competitors on your heels, then that's the problem.
They have this unrealistic expectations, and I personally been able to navigate those, right, by basically working towards alignment, towards setting the right expectations, right. But when I had issues was when I would bring I would bring a team, especially if they don't have much experience with this type of environments, where they're more used to a specific the specific role of developers and nothing more, then I see a lot of friction, and leading that team becomes tiresome, because now I have to manage not only the work that I'm doing, but what everybody else is doing, and eventually it's too much, right?
Yeah, it's not scalable in the long term. If you don't
Right,
have, yeah, if you try to
right.
have, I mean, I've seen that so many times. I mean, the CEO is always the product owner slash CEO. And so trying to get an agreement with them and trying to extract what's in their head, I was almost like compared to when you're trying to, build a logo. It's, I hate logo design because they have an idea of what they think they want in their head, but they're not quite sure how to articulate it. And that's the same with a startup CEO, is where they have an idea of what they think. And if they can't articulate it just because of whatever constraint time, which is most of it, and they want you to do that, I'm going to be in that situation now because I'm actually going to start helping a startup as well. And I have a similar idea, and I think a similar feel as to what I think is very good and important for what the features and what is needed in the application. But it's going to be, I know, a little bit of a challenge where, yeah, I've got to become a product owner basically and let the CEO do their job and have that person trust us to create something that they're happy with. And so, yeah, yeah, it's a fun challenge.
Yes, yes, it's challenging. Yeah.
Mhm.
The I mean, it's interesting as well because it's fast paced,
Mhm.
so it forces you to be on, on your toes, right? Um, but yeah, it is challenging. On the bigger projects, what I've been able to do is to pair designers with the product owners, so that way they will build together the requirements,
Yep.
the mock-ups and the requirements before it got to the development team, right? Um, Plus, we had the designer on our team giving us clarity on the requirements, right?
Mhm.
Um, so we had uh, the delivery of the new feature as a story, right? So the product owner will tell us the story, right? We'll record that. So, because we could have, requirement documents, even if we have really big and long requirement documents, there were so many, little pieces of information that were missing there,
Mhm.
um, that when you're writing it, you don't realize. But then when somebody else has to read it without the context, you get lost. So we took that dreaded task into a fun activity, because it was a team activity and everybody was there. It was like going to a movie, like we're going
Mhm.
to learn about the new feature, right? So that was great. And then with our designer, we will be able to ask any specific questions that we missed, right?
Yeah.
um, One of the things that I remember, and it's small but still, is product owners will give us the happy path,
Mhm.
right? You talk about the login form, right? Okay, what happens if there is a wrong password, right? Oh, I didn't think about that. Just put an error text, right? Figure it out, right? And then any text that we will put as developers will be wrong, right? They will say, oh no, change it for this and this and that, right? So instead of going back and forth, the designer would ask those questions, right? And that way we have the full, you know, workflow with the happy path and the negative path and the errors and the validations, and because we had this uh, uh, component catalog, now we knew exactly where to put the errors, right?
Mhm.
So all of that was, we evolved towards that, and the product owners eventually, it took them a while, but eventually loved it because they could set and forget,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, and they appreciate that. Yeah. um, so you mentioned about AI, right?
Yep.
So how do you think AI is impacting this product development and stakeholder misalignment?
So I think, and what I'm seeing is that some companies they're bypassing the UX and product strategy piece again. They're just saying, "Hey, we just need to integrate AI into our product and it's good. That's all we need." And I know I've seen firsthand where they did that. they moved all their resourcing to create and integrate the AI into their application. And we track things using like analytics tool Pendo, and we see what the prompts are. We'll see maybe one or two prompts, and then that's it. They're not using AI anymore, or not in the way that they wanted to. And that's exactly the problem that, they're like, oh, the CEO has some grand idea of just, hey, we just got to say we've got AI in our product. Everybody wants to say that. But then it's like, your users show that they don't really care, not in the way you've integrated it. You're still not solving their biggest problem. And this is where, you have to, because the cost of integrating that is expensive. And, this is where it becomes even more important to make sure that when you do integrate it, you're integrating it in the correct way. And I think, I don't know. It's again where there's a shiny new object, people just want to like use it, and they think they're going to make millions on using it. And it's just not the case.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean it's like everything. If it becomes these fashions where people just build it because it looks cool, but not necessarily because it's actually needed, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at the VR system with Apple. How many people have bought that thing?
Right,
Yeah.
and it became obsolete. What, 2 years later,
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Meta worlds. I mean, these things, nobody's using it, and they spend billions. Luckily, they
Right.
have billions to spend, but most companies, that would bankrupt most companies out there.
Right.
hmm
So, what advice would you give to to C-suite leaders that are about to launch a software product?
Hire us so you won't fail. No. um, I think if you've done it before and you've launched, lots of products, doesn't mean you know how to do, you have the best playbook. I mean, if you have success, then that's great. But if you're trying to do this for the first time, or you're launching something that has high risk, um, you have to really think about, like, where does your organization stand? Like, certain organizations, they'll have customers, or they'll have their own customers that maybe one of them pays for 50% of the revenue. And so you're driven by that one customer. And so is your organization set up that way? We've been involved in those organizations where this one customer is calling the head of development to say, hey, we want this feature. It's like, that's how your process works. And then everybody else gets, a different build, and now you're maintaining multiple builds, and it just becomes a nightmare. And they think they're doing a good job, but that's not the case. It's not scalable. And so you have to really take a step back in your organization and say, okay, if we're going to launch a new software product, let's think about, like, are we solving the user's pain points? How does that tie into our business goals? And then, are we giving, the risky parts? I mean, that's the biggest thing. Anything that's risky, if you just start building that right away, you're just incorporating more cost and pain if nobody uses it. And now with AI, you have to be fast, you have to have speed, and you have to have direction, because everybody else is using AI. It's like, it's the high tide raises all boats. So if your competitors are using AI and you're using AI, you're kind of at a null kind of advantage. But if they're using AI and they see what you're doing, they're like, oh, let me just vibe code or prompt my way into creating something similar. Then now they're surpassing you. You have to consistently improve on what you've created. So a lot of times, they may do the first part right of strategy, but then I get directives where, okay, thanks, Makoto, thanks for giving us those designs, we're done here. I'm like, are you serious? And it's like, you have to monitor metrics, make it data driven. Okay, your product owner says he wants to launch this feature, we launched it. How's it performing? Is it really helping people with their time on task? Is your NPS scores increasing? These are things that you have to constantly measure. And then is your uh onboarding, is that happening quicker? Are people the learning curve quicker? Because that again is going to be something that is taking away from your resources if you have to sit there and train somebody to use your software for much longer versus if they go a different route. So I think these are all things that they have to like really think about. And if they can manage that themselves, great. But if they don't, then obviously you've got to hire individuals that can kind of get you there. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So we're running out of time. But before we wrap it up, do you have any final remarks?
I think it's been an interesting year, and probably just for everybody. I think a lot of people are overwhelmed at the where AI is going to take us. I'm sure that's on top of everybody's mind. But I think you have to understand, and it's something that's interesting that I actually just posted on LinkedIn. Um, it's the perception of, let's say you're a developer and you need to come up with a marketing plan, use AI. Like, holy cow, this thing's so smart. But I call it's your cognitive dissonance against, like, you don't know much about marketing. You know a little bit about what it is, but you feel like this magic thing that just created this amazing like AI. I don't need marketing anymore because it just created that. But vice versa, if a marketing person says, "Oh, let me vibe code an app. Let me just make the code through AI." You as a developer, when you look at that code, you're like, "Nah, this is just okay." But you as a marketer says, "I don't need developers anymore." You have that cognitive dissonance and that perception of like, "Oh, this thing created this whole thing," but it's because your knowledge gap is far away from what it is. And so I think people have to kind of take a step back and realize that because you're able to gather information so much quicker, especially in gaps in your experience, you're thinking that AI is just going to replace everything. But when you actually are the expert and you get into it, you're like, nah, it's okay and it's helpful, but it's not going to really replace somebody who knows what they're doing. Because I know then, like, sure, you created a website or design, but I can take a look at this and yeah, it could be improved, or that AI just did that. There's so many things that you didn't ask it correctly. It's not showing correctly. And it looks like the 10,000 other things that are out there. What are you going to do to make yourself stand out? You can't vibe code your way into doing that. Maybe some things, but in reality, you can't. And so I feel like people are somewhat have a negative outlook on that. And it's like, just use it to garner that information. So then when you do have the experts in there, they're probably using the AI to help them force multiply their output and make themselves better. So I think, again, everybody who's using it should be using it to their advantage. Don't just omit it completely, but definitely don't think it's, oh, I don't need a marketing, I don't need a dev, I don't need a designer because I've got AI just doing everything for me. It's not there yet, and I think we've got a bit of time before we have to worry about our jobs.
Yes. I mean, I think right now AI is average of all, master of none. So and for vibe coding, it's great for building prototypes, right?
Yeah.
To kind of show your idea. For that is great, but then AI doesn't know how to do abstractions. So so that's where you need a software engineer to do that, right?
Yep.
So it can give you the first step, right? But then if you ask for an improvement on that prototype, you're going to struggle, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to fix one thing, break another, and you're going to keep doing that. So yeah, but I think it's a great tool for a non-technical person to build a prototype, right?
Yep.
I think that's great, right? Because now with a prototype, as a product owner, you can show it to the users, have a conversation about that rather than tell them an idea, right? But can that code become production ready? Not really, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you.
Cool. Well, yeah, I appreciate you having me. This has been great conversation, and yeah, I can't wait to see where the future takes us.
Yes, I appreciate you being here today. I think we learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to hear more about where you take Impact in the future.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.